from that space, we actually create a lot of disconnection within relationships because everybody's navigating from their own story, their own perception of each person based on past-based experiences.
Meagan Fettes is also known as a joy coach. She uses her particular yogic talents to get people to a higher level of consciousness and give them the tools to be their happier self. She's known as the joy coach. Yay, welcome on in, Meagan Fettes.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
So welcome on into the Lunch and Learn. You got the same earbuds I do. That's excellent.
Yeah. No, I'm trying different techniques with this.
Yes, we're going to keep trying. All right, so redefine us again, body image. You have a really interesting definition of body image. I'd like you to share it with our audience one more time.
Yeah, absolutely. So body image is caused by the connection or disconnection, depending on what's happening with the mind and the body.
Mm-hmm. So there's a disconnection with the mind and the body, how you really see yourself?
Yes. Yeah. So when we're not connected within our body, or our mind's not connected to our body, we see a different image than what is actually the truth, or what is the true perception.
So you can really see, since my following is mostly weight loss surgery patients, and a lot of them have lost 100 pounds, 150 pounds, 200 pounds or more. And that could really cause a lot of body dysmorphia, right?
Absolutely. Especially because usually when it is more rapid, and I mean, I've met a lot of your patients, amazing transformations, and it's quite rapid, right? So the mind sometimes has a hard time catching up to that physical transformation that's happened. And especially when there's still old belief patterns or old ideas of who they were and what they looked like, it's bringing that intention back into the body so that they can reconnect and see themselves where they truly are, not where they remember themselves.
That's right. Today we're going to talk about how body image affects your relationships. So I've got 3 areas I want to talk about with you real quick. But let's start with a simple one. Like, how about as you're losing weight, how does your body image affect like your work environment, your relationship with your boss or your coworkers?
Your relationship at work? Well, it goes into, so last week I know we talked about a little bit with the creation of our story or our pattern of our thoughts. When we're in that space of judgment, then we see and we're looking for that evidence to support the judgment that we currently have. So when it comes to, say, work, usually there's a lack of confidence when we're not feeling great within our like body image, or not seeing ourselves within our true body image. So we won't show up the same way. Right? We'll start looking for ways that we're not good at what we're doing. We're not good enough, and start acting out those ways. So maybe we don't show up with deadlines, or maybe we don't show up with a lot of energy or a positive mindset, or whatever might bring vitality back into our work.
So you're saying how we view ourselves, our body image, can affect our productivity at work then?
Absolutely. Yeah, because when we get into, like, when we talk again back to the connection of our mind and our body, if we're disconnected, then our mind's not present. So then we can't actually be productive, focused, or concentrated on any specific thing at all. And usually we're in what I call the ego mind. So we're more focused on worrying about what other people think of us, or trying to control their perception of ourselves, versus actually focusing on the task at hand.
Now, some bosses, some employers would be excited to see their employees get healthier, lose weight, become more confident, but not always. What can somebody do in that situation when maybe their boss or their coworkers aren't as supportive? Do you think that's a projection that the patient is putting out, or is that an incoming opinion?
It can be a bit of both, to be honest. Because again, we're human beings that are structured in habitual ways of being. And so as the patient who's lost weight, there may be that story running around perception of judgment, or fear still around how people are perceiving. But But then also on the external, there is that judgment cycle going on as well. So we create stories and try to categorize people so that we can understand them. And from that space, we actually create a lot of disconnection within relationships because everybody's navigating from their own story, their own perception of each person based on past-based experiences. So when somebody changes, people don't often see that change. They're still seeing that individual in the past.
You know, that's actually a good segue to the next question, the next type of relationship, which is like your spouse or partner, intimate relationships. And a lot of patients think that if they lose the weight, they're going to look sexier and their spouse is going to be more interested. And sometimes they find that they're not as interested. Why do you think that is?
Well, again, it kind of goes back into that like story or that past-based experience. But the other aspect that happens too is when we're going through big transformations, we often will push away people as a little bit of a protection mechanism. So, and I can speak to this within myself because I know in my relationship with my husband, we've been together for 15 years. We've been through a lot of ups and downs, a lot of emotional stuff, a lot of changes. And during those transformations, we tend to push away to protect. And then the other individual learns through those behaviors, those patterns, that perhaps you aren't interested. So then we get kind of confused because yes, we go through this big transformation and then all of a sudden we're ready and we're expecting the spouse or partner to be ready as well. But we've taught them out of that protection mechanism
to push away.
We don't want them. So we actually have to make the effort to reconnect the relationship versus expecting them to do it on their own.
I love that. So how people are responding to us is something that we taught them.
Yes, we teach people how to treat us.
And I could see that because when someone's morbidly obese, gosh, there's a lot of relationship dysfunction. There's a lot of enabling. There's a lot of negativity. And so just because you lose the weight doesn't mean you're going to get the love and affection automatically, right? You have to work towards that.
Yes. Yeah. And what's interesting in relationships is we're always communicating out of our own journey and our own expectations. We very rarely actually clearly communicate with each other and figure out what the other person needs and how we can support each other, telling them what we need and what they need, and finding that balance and compromise between the two.
So how does someone get past that then? Like how do you, give me like an example of a conversation you might have. If you're the patient and I'm the spouse, what would you say to me if you feel like I'm not giving you the attention that you're expecting?
So one thing that I love to share is it's like that old golden rule that we learn in like kindergarten of treat others the way you want to be treated. And I don't believe in that. I believe in treat yourself the way you want to be treated and then treat others the way they want to be treated.
That's interesting.
So when it comes to relationships, it's like sit down and figure out how do you communicate with love. So if the spouse is somebody who likes to hold hands or likes that physical touch, are you sitting down and offering that space of providing that? And what I found, at least in my relationship and with my clients' relationships, because we do a lot of like couple workshops, is really honing into that focal point of give yourself what you need to feel loved, to feel nurtured, and then focus then from that space on giving your spouse what they need.
Okay, so what does that conversation look like? Pretend I'm your spouse. What would you say? And you've lost 100 pounds, and we aren't as intimate as you'd like. What would you say to me?
So I would ask, how do you want me to show you affection?
How do you want me to show you affection?
Because your definition of affection will probably be different than mine. Okay.
And I have a good response because thinking about a husband, he might He might not say anything. He might go, oh, you know, leave me alone. He might grunt. But let's say he does respond. He might say something like, you know, you used to always have dinner ready for me when I come home from work, and I'm really tired. And now it seems like you just want to go out all the time.
Mm-hmm. So with that, a lot of it comes with vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned this method from a friend of mine, and I still teach it to this day because it is super effective when it comes to relationships. But more often than not, when we have conversations, they're very surface, right? And especially in relationships, we get into patterns, we kind of go through the motions, and we don't actually stop to think about how do we reconnect, right? So maybe we're in a pattern of always going out again. And the first step to shifting that is getting really vulnerable and allowing yourself to share how that makes you feel. So like when we go out all the time, I feel like we're distracted. We're not actually allowing ourselves to connect. And I feel disconnected. And when we allow ourselves to tap into the vulnerability, we're actually letting go of control. So more often than not, we navigate from this place of people pleasing. So we'll just do whatever everybody wants us to do out of hopes that they'll like us. Or we do the perfectionism where we do everything incredibly right and almost hyper-focused on that. And both of those are mechanisms for control in the relationship. And so we have to get very real with how are we showing up those ways in the relationship? Are we just going along with the flow of going out all the time with our spouse? And is that really what we want? And if it's not, then let yourself be real. Let yourself be vulnerable to shift that path.
So I hear what you're saying. So what would the woman say if the man said, you know, I'm just tired. I don't want to go out all the time, but you seem to want to go out all the time. What would the woman respond? How should you respond?
I would ask, like, what is it that you need right now? And if they're like, I just want to stay home. Okay. Then I would find a way to compromise. So we can stay home, but let's make it a focus that we're connected with one another.
Because I could see it going badly. This conversation could easily escalate to an argument, right? Like, you've lost 100 pounds and you think you're all hot and you're just going out to try to find some other dude. You're just going to leave me, and I just been working all the time. I'm a good man and I'm tired and I just want my, dinner. And you could see how it could easily escalate, right?
Yes. And so, like, if you don't mind going back to that model that I taught last week.
Yes, please.
What I love about relationships, and I kind of get a little bit giddy about this, is because I love relationships. We need relationships, right? We're connected beings. But when somebody's speaking that way, we often have this like unintentional way of just assuming that it's all about us. So if this person, for example, like you say, the man maybe comes out and he's like, you've lost all this weight and you think you're hot shit and you're going out all the time to find this new guy, that's a direct reflection of how he's internally feeling. So instead, as a spouse or a partner, instead of allowing yourself to engage into that space, take that step back and realize that in that moment was his point of vulnerability. It might not have been intentional, but that was your opportunity to see how he's really feeling. So don't take it personally. Because a lot of the communication comes from the I mind versus the us mind.
I love that. So what you're saying is sometimes when the person is attacking you, that's when they're trying to be vulnerable? Yes.
Because that's often the only way that we know how to be vulnerable is by putting it on to other people. And that's really a magical place to be. But often in relationships, we jump into that and assume that they are attacking us, but they're not.
Okay, so I say that to you. How should the woman then respond so that it doesn't escalate, so that it becomes a deeper conversation like what you're saying?
So then I would take that pause, right? Because we have that moment of choice. Do we react or do we de-escalate? So breathe and then allow questions. So this is how you're feeling. This is what I'm hearing. You're feeling perhaps a little bit insecure because I've lost this weight. How are you handling this change?
I like that. I like the mirroring aspect of that. This is what I'm hearing you're saying. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. And then give your partner time to either confirm, maybe retract a little bit, you know. They could attack more too.
Yeah. And that's where like this model tends to be a little bit scary, right? Because we don't like conflict. As human beings, we'll do everything and anything to avoid conflict. But the reality is that sometimes we have to let go of that fear. And we have to let ourselves be vulnerable and in that place where we don't have control. We don't have control over how the other person reacts. We do have control though if we engage into it or not.
Yeah. I love that. So what about a scenario where both the husband and the wife both have weight loss surgery and they've both lost a tremendous amount of weight? I find that it seems to be 50-50. They'll either be stronger together or they're going to break up.
Totally. And it depends on, so one thing with relationships that I love to encourage, whether it's both of them going through this big transformation or just one, is getting really clear on a commonality, like a common focus. So a lot of couples don't have a common goal or a common direction of which they're moving. And so whether that be health, whether that be health, I mean, really, it all comes down to health, whether it be health in your finances, health in your body, health in every aspect of your life. Have that one common goal so that as that's happening, each person understands the steps that the other person's doing and taking to get to that goal.
So a simple one would be then sharing a common goal weight, maybe?
Yeah, totally. And I love to bring it back into like when you bring yourself into that common goal weight, what opportunity will that create for you? So will that give you more energy? Will that give you the opportunity to do more active things? What will it do so that they both have that common, like tangible, reachable goal, but then also the whys behind it are really strong.
Travel more together, see more sites together, do more things together.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Okay, so the last relationship I wanted to discuss is probably the hardest one, and that's the relationship with yourself.
Yes.
So how does a patient who's lost 150 pounds, first of all, let's just say like what might be some of these internal feelings that they might go through?
Well, there might be some anger. We go through like a grieving process, right? Like it's not just grieving when we lose somebody. We go through a continuous grieving cycle when we shift and change who we are. And especially when we go through massive transformations, there is that grieving cycle of like going through anger, going through shame, going through that introspection of what happened.
Going through denial.
Yeah.
Denial is part of
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
So the 7 stages of grieving will come up in that process because that's the way that our mind actually works to let go. So it's the release pattern, basically, I'll call it. And really and truly, when it comes to emotion, we have to let ourselves feel every single emotion. Like there's no such thing as a bad emotion and a good emotion. They're just emotions. But it's when we hold on to them and we stuff them that then it begins to create unpleasant patterns. Which is really challenging because we've been taught that we don't want to feel angry. We don't want to feel resentment. We don't want to feel jealousy. Like those are all bad emotions. We've told ourselves. So it's, again, allowing ourselves just to be with how it shows up in our body. giving ourselves the space to experience it. I often with my clients talk about feelings within the body. That's why we call emotions feelings, is because we can feel them.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of attaching our mind to the story about why we created that feeling,
Mm-hmm.
instead just letting ourselves feel it, be with it, experience it, and then it'll slowly dissipate and release.
Mm. You know, I love this idea that it's a grieving cycle. It's a grieving process. And I'd like to touch on that maybe next week if you have time. Kind of
Yeah,
talk about, yeah, how we start to release this grieving process and how we work through this whole body image issue and how we get to start seeing how we really actually look. So reconnecting that mind and body separation. What do you think about that? Sound good?
absolutely. I would love that.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Meagan Fettes, it's been amazing. I can't believe 30 minutes has already gone by.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, it goes by fast. So if people wanted to connect with you on social media, what's the best way that they can find you?
Follow me on Facebook. So
Mm-hmm.
either my personal page, Meagan Fettes, or my business page, Meagan Fettes, the Joy Coach.
Mm-hmm. And you have a website too.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's meaganfettes.com. I can leave it in the comments as well so that it's
Mm.
easy, because I have one of those names that was popular in the 80s. So everybody made it very unique in spelling.
A very searchable name, yours.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
awesome. Well, Meagan, it was great talking to you today. You did a great job. Really gave me a lot to think about. I'm sure my viewers will have to digest this.
Cool. Well,
Cool?
thank you for having me again. I've loved it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll see you next week, Meagan.
All right. Sounds great. See ya.
Bye. Man, what another amazing lunch and learn. What'd you guys think? How mind-blowing was that, right? The first takeaway, your relationship at work. How your body image can affect your relationship at work with your boss, your coworkers, because you start telling the story about how you're not good enough, and you can unconsciously self-sabotage your work performance. Think about that. Number one. Number two, relationship. We talked then about the relationship with your significant other, your spouse. In this case, we used a female patient with a male husband, and the stories, the conversations that we have are oftentimes on a very superficial level. And if you feel like your spouse is not as interested in you after you've lost this weight, it's time to sit down and have a conversation where you both can be vulnerable. And the big takeaway from Meagan was that she said, if they're attacking you, like in the scenario I used, you want to go out all the time, you're just you're getting all this attention from all these other men, that's them being vulnerable. And what you need to do in that case is ask them, repeat, like, this is what I hear you saying. How does that make you feel? How does it make you feel when I act that way, when I dress up this way, when I ask to go out? How does that make you feel? And to try not to escalate it into an argument. What an amazing piece of advice. Then the last topic we talked about was, how does body image affect your most important relationship, right? Which is the relationship you have with yourself. And her answer was amazing, which is that it's a grieving process. When you lose massive amounts of weight, you have to grieve the loss of your old self. And that is what I have been saying for years. And I got attacked by so many people in our weight loss community, our bariatric community, saying that what I said was an asshole thing, that you're always the same person. And I said, no, man, like, you've got to let that bitch die, that old fat self. You got to let her die. And Meagan confirmed it today by saying it's a grieving process. If you want to start seeing yourself in the mirror as how you really connect, you've got to go through the grieving process, y'all. If you are 3 years out and you've lost a lot of weight and you still see the fat you when you look in the mirror, it's possibly because you never grieved her. You never grieved her loss, right? And you need to do that Super excited. Our next video, we're going to talk about how we start making this mind-body connection and getting over these transformations so that our body image aligns.
Hi, Dr. Vuong here. If you loved that video, I hope you will check out velocity2020.com. I want to meet you in person. This is my big annual conference in Vegas. It's amazing. It's not just about weight loss surgery, but it's about taking your life up to the next level. You're going to meet the best people, the best speakers, the best audience possible. You're going to really take your life up to the next level. 2020 is all about vision, clarity, and focus. We're going to show you how to find your vision, what you really want to do with your life, get crystal clear, clarity, and then find your laser focus to do what you need to do to have the amazing life that you deserve. Hope to see you there.